Hi, MC Bling Daddy here. Welcome to the fourth in a series of videos to explain the coding engine, CE, for Minecraft, designed to make coding as a high-level programming language more readily available to coders directly within the game. In this video, we'll look at the use of variables. To do so, we'll augment a loop we created in the last video. If you have questions on terminology or how things work, you might refer to the YouTube series on command block coding, or CBC, that was created earlier, or to earlier episodes in this coding engine series. As usual, let's give ourselves some room. 4 rows. To define variables, we can use the Minecraft scoreboard functionality. Scoreboard variables are called objectives. The command to create one is fairly straightforward, as you can see here. The only thing that adds some complexity is determining the type of the entity holding the objective, in this case, dummy. Objectives can track health or possessions, but we are simply interested in arithmetical operations. Recording and intermixing other properties in a single variable would interfere with our needs. However, at some point you might find it useful to perform operations on player properties, so keep that in mind. Now keep in mind also that in higher level languages, it's recommended that you explicitly define variables, as we're doing here, rather than make whatever executes your code try to figure it out. For example, if you misspell a variable name, some compilers will alert you that the misspelled variable doesn't exist. Otherwise, you'd be performing operations on an undefined value and hoping to get valid results. In our case, we've been operating on changing the height of the WC, the change represented here as h. So let's create the code to define h. Of course, we also need to define how much we want to raise the height by setting or initializing it. Let's say we want to raise WC 10. Now, we could set it here, but for demonstration purposes, we'll set it in the code itself. Note that when we set h, we assign it to an entity of sorts, var. Var doesn't actually exist, but could, and Minecraft will define it and keep track of it anyway. Let's create the code to set h, but we'll change the actual value there in the code. We have some things to do in the code area. First of all, we'll look at the code we generated. Here's our declaration of h. Here's where we set h. Let's change the setting to 10. We need to create the variable and set it to, so let's do that now. Remember though that once h is defined for this world, it will remain until removed, if you want, so you don't have to define it again. If we need to reset the value of h in the future though, we can just come back and re-execute only that command block. Put a button on top of the command block and just execute that one by itself. We're going to use the incomplete loop we created last time, and we're going to change the test to use h. This test checks to see if the objective, what we call a variable, for fake identity var, is 1 or greater. We'll be decrementing, reducing, h by 1 each time we run the loop. So we're checking to see when it gets to 0. Next, we need to add on to the loop a bit, so we'll remove the final block and its repeater, after noting its code reference, so we can expand the loop. Then we'll need to put the code cursor in position, 2 blocks after the end of the previous code, so we can continue on adding code with the engine. Let's finish up the loop we just truncated. First, we need to begin the end in the way we should of every standard loop. We need to set up the loop for the next iteration. We'll set the first statement in the third set of command creation blocks. In our case, that would mean decreasing the value of our variable h by 1. Mojang has a page on scoreboards that may help you understand this command. And of course, we need to finish off the end of the loop by entering the correct names for transferring back to the beginning of the loop and for the end of the loop set point. Then we need to create those blocks to complete the code. Let's review the code and see how it works. We'll start at main, then enter the loop through the startup transfer. The first thing that happens is that we check if h is greater than 0. This is required if the loop is to continue execution. Next is the logic test to determine whether the test result is true or false. If false, the upper command block executes a transfer to loop end. If true, as before, a grab block is placed at WC and WC is elevated. To finish the loop, h is decremented and control transferred back to the start of the loop. The last block is the loop end set point. So let's execute the loop, but first we'll set up to view h. The loop executes until h is reduced to 0, as you can see from the display, then exits through the loop end. Note that the comparator is on until the very end. Well, that's it for now. Next time we'll look at for loop variables and the complexities they entail. Please join me. Thanks for watching.